BigMarker, but we do have the little pop-up in the bottom because we recognize that, you know, not everyone's always going to remember, you know, you might be a little nervous before your webinar, you might just be really eager to get started. So we always have a little pop-up there. And then as you can see now in the upper right-hand, or excuse me, upper left-hand corner, we have the red recording little signal that signifies that you are recording. And then if we do, or when we do stop the recording, it will show recorded in gray in the top left-hand corner then.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to kick us off here now because we are going to post this recording afterwards so that people can test out that process as well. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tracy Lawrence, and I'm the founder of Lifetime Tech Deal Fans. And just a little bit of a background on our group. Our group started as a place for fans and customers of tech deals to discuss what we were getting, because in the past it was all vendor groups and chat through to, you know, different providers, but there wasn't a place for us to naturally aggregate. And, you know, there's a whole backstory back in September when we started, but now we're up to over 6,400 members who talk about different tech deals. And we've had the opportunity to bring deals like BigMarker, although I will say this one's extraordinary, where companies look at our group and they say, what an opportunity to get a smaller number of dedicated users who can give us feedback on new features as we roll them out, for example, because people that are on lifetime deals use software differently. Somebody who's on a monthly plan doesn't necessarily want to test a new feature. If it doesn't work, they go, oh, that system doesn't work, and they go elsewhere. Lifetime deal users lean into it and become highly invested raving fans that also help improve these things. And what you'll see about BigMarker is it's fully developed, and they've got, you know, a lot of history. Daniel in the group, for example, had used it with his university course a number of years ago. So this is, and Northwestern University uses it. But what they'll be looking at is, as they roll out Facebook Live in the next month, they'll be looking to our users to test it and to give them feedback before they roll it out to their larger monthly recurring customers. So anyways, that's who I am. I'm going to hand it over to Hannah, because just for those of you joining us, I'm in Las Vegas on hotel Wi-Fi, and I'm concerned that I don't want anybody to view my quality of internet concerns as BigMarker issues. So I'm actually going to drop off camera and let Hannah take over. Are you okay with that, Hannah? And I'll sort of take a look at the Q&A, but just a reminder that they've got a feature here that you can add your comments to Q&As, and we've already got a couple of those in there. Yeah. So over to you, Hannah, to introduce yourself and just do sort of what you do, and I'll jump in with questions. And maybe at the end, we can even have some of our people jump on camera. So if you're interested in that, put it in chat, and at the end, we'll sort of test it with how it works with multiple people on there. So
Absolutely.
Thanks, Hannah. Over to you.
Absolutely. And thanks, Tracy, so much. For all of you who are just joining or who may not have talked to me already, or, you know, my name is Hannah. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at BigMarker. So demos are kind of my thing. I'm going to be taking you all through, you know, just essentially the complete hosting experience from start to finish on BigMarker. And if you've tested the system already, great. This might just kind of be like a refresher. But for those of you who haven't, you know, gotten on and tested it, this, you know, is going to actually give you the full kind of bird's eye view of what BigMarker has to offer. Now, what I mentioned previously, for those of you just joining, is that I think I'm going to try to break down the Q&A into 3 to 4 more manageable parts. So typically in my demos, I cover 3 parts: the channel, the webinar setup process, and then also the hosting experience. So in between each of those parts, and then a larger Q&A at the end, I'm thinking that we can definitely answer questions, because I know that you guys have excellent questions. As Tracy mentioned, you already have questions coming into the Q&A. So throw all of your questions in there. We will get to them. And again, just keep those questions coming. Now, I, as you may have noticed, talk with my hands a lot. So I'm going to go just to my mic for my screen sharing portion, but I will jump back on with Cam at the end. So you'll just hear me drop off for just a moment here. 1 moment. Alrighty, and you should hear my voice again. So just let me know in the chat. As long as you can hear me loud and clear, we can go ahead and get started. Okay, thanks, Tracy. So like I mentioned, I'm going to do a bit of screen sharing here. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and I'm going to also pop out the chat just so I can kind of follow along even though I'm screen sharing. So you should see BigMarker tips, tricks, tours, and more in the center here. And don't worry, I will be kind of zooming in and out, so you will see things pretty clearly as well. So cool. So as I mentioned, I'm breaking down today's demo into 3 kind of more bite-sized pieces, so to speak. And where I always like to start my demos is on the channel. Now I'm showing off my, one of my channels that I have on BigMarker. And when you signed up for this lifetime deal, you may have noticed that you were, asked to add your company name or organization name to create this channel. Now, to explain what the channel is on BigMarker is it's essentially like your company account, your organization's overarching account for all of the webinar hosting activities that you do on BigMarker. Now, what does that mean? That means that all of your recordings, all of your upcoming webinars will be stored here, and you can make it public facing. You can have subscribers join your channel and kind of make it like this interactive environment, or you can keep it closed and kind of more of an internal space to store and keep your content. Now, another concept is channel hosts. Now, host licenses on BigMarker, what does that essentially mean? And what can they do, and how is that different from like a guest presenter? So on BigMarker, you have the concept of channel hosts, and with your lifetime deal, you do get, this one host license. And that means that you can actually schedule and set up webinars on BigMarker. So as a host, I can schedule and set these up, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I can't have others coming on and either co-presenting with me, or I can actually set up the webinar and actually have somebody else drive it all together. Now, when we actually set up that webinar and take a look around, I'll show you how to set those guest presenters up, but just letting you know, the difference here between what we traditionally call a host license and a guest presenter on BigMarker, that would be, the major difference. But what I like to say about the channel, just kind of driving things back to the channel piece, is that your channel really is the macro view of your BigMarker account. Again, it's where all of your content is stored, and you do have that unlimited hosting capabilities and unlimited recording storage. So it's kind of like a library for your content. And also just kind of give you an idea of where the channel will be in a few weeks or months from now, is that we're actually going to be including a tagging feature. Right now, everything is chronologically ordered, based on, the time and dates and times that you host your webinars. However, in the very near future, you'll be able to actually set different tags for each of your webinars, so that if you want to sort them a little bit differently, you'll be able to do that on the channel. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to be covering 3 parts of the demo today, and we've just covered part 1, which is the channel. Now, I'm going to draw it back to the Q&A to see if anyone has any questions. It does look like we do have a few. And from there, we'll just go on to the next part, which is then creating and setting up that webinar. So, question, we can choose which webinars go on the channel, right? Okay, that is an excellent question. So this concept of, privacy and who can see what and everything like that is a really, really good way to kind of break down the channel. So what you'll notice if you go to the settings section of your channel is that you can make your channel in the privacy and visibility section. You can make it public, private, or invisible. You can also require future subscribers to apply. That means it's kind of almost, and I like to give this Facebook reference, it's like a friend request. You can accept it or deny it if you want to have the future subscribers apply or not. And then in terms of channel privacy, if your channel itself is public, then all of the public webinars, so again, public and private webinars and also public and private channels are a little bit different. So all of your public webinars will be visible on the channel. So that means that if you want to hide certain webinars, but you still want to make it a public webinar, or public channel, you can make some of your webinars private, but you can have others be public, and then everyone will be, anyone and everyone who visits your channel will be able to view that content. Now, if it's a private or invisible channel, that means that all of that content is going to be hidden from view. So, Joe Schmo off the street, if they get their hands on your webinar, or on your channel link, they're not going to be able to see that content there. So just, something to think about if you do want it to be that customer facing, but let's say you want to host like private meetings or something like that on the channel. You can still hide those from view. Now you'll be able to see it as an admin of that channel, but just like I said, Joe Schmo off the street, they're not going to see those webinars on your channel. So another question, is there an option to make those CTA pop-ups more discreet? So that's an excellent question. We're going to get to that later in the demo when we actually talk about call to action pop-ups. The design is entirely up to you. You can actually embed like HTML code into your pop-ups. So if you want to kind of build your own, that would be a really good way to do it. But again, to not confuse people, we'll get to that later in the session. Another question, can you please show the subscriber/discussion feature on channels because it's kind of a community? Yes, so actually when BigMarker was created, it was created with the intent to, build a community around your webinar hosting. Now, since then, we've kind of pivoted into more of like a marketing kind of approach to webinars, since that's kind of where webinars have really taken a turn in the past, I want to say like 3 to 5 years. But we still have this core product that really allows you to connect with people if you so choose.
This is Tracy just jumping in, Hannah. This is one of the things that for the group, this is super unique in the webinar space because, other webinar providers might give you a page where you can see your webinars. That's quite rare. But what this allows you to do, and when Hannah goes through it, even charge to have people subscribe to. So it can be almost a little baby membership system for those of you that are building your assets. You can run a webinar, have subscribers there, and even use it as a test drive for a more formal e-learning platform, for example. Anyways, over to you, Hannah. I just want to say this is something I'm really excited about. With our LTD fans, what we'll do once you can go live to Facebook is we'll run our Facebook Lives through BigMarker, but then all of our members will be able to go back and re-watch the BigMarker launch, for example, on our channel.
Exactly.
I think it's super cool. Anyways, thanks.
No problem. So as you can see here, we have these 4 kind of tabs here that are customer facing. Obviously, they're not going to see the settings tab, but that's only limited to you and anyone else with admin access of your account. But you have this subscriber section that Tracy mentioned, this discussion board, and this calendar feature. And I like to kind of describe it as almost like a Facebook group or a unique community for your webinar hosting experience. So in the subscriber tab, you can build a subscriber list. So people who are actually, subscribed to your channel. And as Tracy mentioned, you can actually set up membership dues. So for example, if you want to give like an all access pass to your webinars and kind of build this community around your webinar hosting, in the settings tab here, you can actually set up channel or what we call membership dues. And then people will, like I said, have access to your webinar content. They can utilize the discussion board, which is, I like to call it like a Facebook newsfeed or wall, again, using that kind of more familiar reference. So you can share content, you can post messages, add files, you can pin the post to top, and kind of all of that kind of interactive piece. You can even post a poll as well. And then finally, we have the calendar section as well. That's going to be not only something for webinar events to be listed on, but also if you have like external events. So let's say you want to do like a meetup next Tuesday and you want to let your group know about it. You can actually share not only those webinar events, but you can do a new webinar or new, any sort of event, and then people will be able to find out about it, within your subscriber list. So there's all these kind of interactive pieces to the channel. And again, use it if it makes sense for you, but it's also not required. It's something that it's kind of one of those things where whatever makes the most sense to you is going to be the best fit. So I hope that answers your question, Tracy. Let me know if there's any other questions out there about that.
That's great. Now,
awesome.
On the discussion feature, will you also be able to cover how we can do that by webinar? Because I think that's another thing that's kind of neat, is all the different ways to interact in a richer way than sort of the traditional old school webinar.
Right. So on the discussion board here, we have it for the channel. If you're going to want like a discussion section for an individual webinar, that would be actually set up on kind of the webinar side of things. So if we want to do that next, we can actually cover setting up the webinar, and then I'll definitely get to that in the edit tab, show you how to do that on the landing page of your webinar. Should we move on? I'm not seeing any other.
Yeah, that's great. Sorry.
Oh, yes.
We've got some other questions.
Yeah. So I see, do subscribers see other subscribers, or can we turn that off? You can absolutely turn that off. Again, if you go refer back to the settings tab and go to the privacy and visibility section of your webinar, or excuse me, of your channel, you can say, okay, do I want to allow subscribers to see each other? If the answer is yes, then everyone will be listed out and they can see who else is subscribed. However, you can definitely turn that off. And then there's other, subscriber privacy, like do you want to show their full name or just the first name and last initial, or even a username? And also invitations, like do you only want the organizer to be able to invite, all of that kind of stuff. So there's definitely lots and lots of information that can be kind of edited and managed from the channel settings. As you can see here, I have application questions turned on. So I have, 48 people who have applied to join my channel. And then from there, you can accept or decline.
And add fees and that sort of thing.
Yep, the fees are located here in the fees section. So if I want to require subscribers to pay a subscription fee, then I can decide not only the amount, but also the billing frequency. So it could be a monthly, it could be a biannual, or even an annual, membership fee.
Well, and just, I'm going to hop in here as well. Just a reminder that they've added Stripe and Authorize.net to our lifetime deal. Normally, that's a feature that they include in their most expensive plan, but it's been added into our lifetime. I'm going to field this question, Hannah, if I may, about the Bimasara is asking, is there a subscriber limit? It's based on the number of contacts you have. And so the base plan has 2,000 contacts. And what they added in is that for every 100 attendees that you add as an add-on, you get another 1,000 contacts. And so you can send as many emails as you want to those contacts that you have. I hope that answers the question. One of the things I also wanted to mention is on the Q&A, I'm not sure what you can see from the attendee limit, but it's so cool because the most popular ones pop right to the top. Right. And then when they're answered, I can just click answer and it keeps those Q&A clean. Right, exactly. So yes, there's an upvote feature. If you have the same question as someone else, that's actually going to pop that question even higher on the list so that, as a host, you'll see that, okay, 5 attendees want to know this question, I'm going to get to that with a little bit more urgency than maybe a question that doesn't have any upvotes. So that's definitely a really cool kind of functionality and feature Hannah, that you can utilize as well. Hannah, I understand that right now it's only US dollars. From my discussion with you, I understand that you are adding other currencies and that will be easier through Stripe. Is that correct? Because I know that we've got a very international market. Right, yes. And that's something that we've definitely got requests for in the past. We have users that use BigMarker all over the world. And obviously our goal is to, make BigMarker as globally user-friendly as possible. That's what we're doing with translations. That's what we aim to do with offering payments in all sorts of currencies. So it is definitely on our roadmap. It's something that we will be tackling soon. So please stay tuned for that. It's a really exciting feature that's coming up. And just while we're on this charging thing, do you mind, Hannah, just answering the question? Eric's got a question about when using Stripe, does BigMarker charge extra other than the Stripe fee? No. So actually, with traditional payments on BigMarker, we collect a 5% processing fee, which encompasses, credit card fees, processing fees on BigMarker's end, et cetera. With the Stripe integration, it's completely waived. So you have no additional fees on BigMarker's end. Perfect. Thank you. No problem. Are we good to move on from the channel? I don't see any other channel questions at this time. So with that, I think the next best step is to actually cover how to set up a webinar, which is everyone's, question. What can I do and how do I set it up? So, this kind of brings us to part 2 of the demo, which is, scheduling. And the cool thing is with BigMarker, we offer all these different types of webinars that you can host, but they're all going to be scheduled in the same exact place. So regardless of the type of webinar you're hosting, all you have to do is click the green schedule button in the top right-hand corner of your screen.
And from there, you're going to be brought to a like scheduling kind of modal here. So you are asked, which type of webinar do you want to create? And as you can see here, we actually have 5 webinar types that are listed, and then the webinar series functionality is coming soon. I anticipate that should be ready in about a month or two, down the road. So stay tuned for that. But let's cover these first 5, and we'll actually get into setting up a webinar as well. So the first and kind of foremost is the live webinar functionality. Obviously, this is just your standard run-of-the-mill webinar. If you're looking to host a live session, just kind of like what we're hosting today, the live webinar option is going to be the perfect option for you. Now, getting into more of these kind of niche products, we have On Demand, which on BigMarker, it's going to be a pre-recorded video, so like an MP4 video that you are uploading to a landing page on BigMarker. Now, when people visit this landing page, they know they're viewing a recording. It's not like a simulated live environment. However, it's kind of more robust than if you were just to throw your video on YouTube. This is a place where you can not only customize the landing page of the webinar, but you can also do things like sell tickets to view this recording. You can even collect registrations as well. So if you want to collect leads on people viewing these, videos, you can take, if you have like recordings from another webinar platform or any other kind of library of content that you want to load to BigMarker, this would be a great option for you. Now, getting into that more simulated live experience, we have 2 types of automated webinars. We have the regular standard automated webinar, and then we also have evergreen webinars. And the way that these are set up are exactly the same. The difference lies in how they're scheduled. So to kind of illustrate what an automated webinar or evergreen webinar is on BigMarker is it's the simulated live experience. However, it's still hosted in a live webinar. So as Tracy was kind of mentioning, and for those of you who joined us in the beginning, that for a lot of my public demos, I will actually automatically play like videos. I'll auto send some chat messages in the beginning, but then I do come on and facilitate like a live Q&A at the very end. So if you want to be in your automated webinars or evergreen webinars, you certainly can, but it's not required. All you have to do is pre-program that content. And then again, the difference lies in how you're scheduling it. So for a traditional automated webinar, that's when you're scheduling, a specific date and time. So let's say next Friday at noon, I'm going to be hosting this automated webinar, or maybe, you can still do a few different times. It doesn't have to be single session, but you're scheduling out the times and dates manually. Whereas with Evergreen, that's going to be a more automated process. So let's say I want to host a webinar every hour, Monday through Friday from 9 to 5, business hours or something like that. That's how I would set up my evergreen webinar. So if you want it to be on a recurring kind of loop of this automated webinar, evergreen is for you. But if you just want to do like 1 or a couple sessions, the standard automated webinar feature will be your best bet for that. And then that 5th and final section is the 24/7 webinar. And with your LTD subscription, you have this meeting room. And a lot of questions that I've been receiving is, what's the difference between a meeting room and a 24/7 webinar? Because a 24/7 webinar is an always open webinar room, very similarly to that meeting room. Now, the difference between the two is that there isn't much of a difference. Really, it's just how they are kind of displayed. So it's more of like an aesthetic difference. With the 24/7 webinar, you have this nice looking landing page that you can, customize and utilize like all of our templates and everything like that. Whereas the meeting room is a little bit more bare bones. It's just a, quick button that people can click and enter. So both are kind of really good for these kind of drop-in meetings and sessions like that. The only difference between these, aside from, being always open, the only kind of feature difference between these and like hosting like a regular webinar is you cannot record. So if you are looking to record and you still just want to host like a meeting, the live webinar option will be a better bet. And I have been telling this to other people as well. BigMarker's hosting interface is the same for webinars and meetings. It's just how you use the room. So if you do want to use webinars for meetings or meetings for webinars, anything like that, you certainly can. The difference is really, it's just aesthetically different. I hope that answers everyone's questions.
Hannah, can you hear me, Hannah?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so first of all, how cool is this? BigMarker is giving me this big red bar across the top that my hotel Wi-Fi and my audio have issues, which is a super great caution because there's really nothing I can do about it right now here at the hotel, but it's good to know and to be able to explain that to people.
Right.
one of the things I really love about this is what you mentioned, the fact that the meeting and the webinar interface are virtually identical.
Right.
And so for those people that are less comfortable with webinars, you can get really familiar with the platform on meetings, which are less risky, and then have a high familiarity when you go to run a webinar. One of the things, though, that has been raised, and Mark's asked this question, is meeting room recording on the roadmap.
Right. So
I know you've been asked that a lot, because I know that's certainly an issue that I have as well.
Right.
I love recording my Zoom meetings.
So unfortunately, I don't have a direct timeline. It's something that we've definitely grappled with in the past. It's something that we definitely are interested in pursuing. Right now,
Can I give you his answer to me?
Yes, please, please. Because he would know better than I.
Yeah,
the developer.
His answer is they have expedited this because for many of us, that is something that is, the ability to have a one-on-one coaching call and be able, we can certainly use a webinar for that.
Right.
But that is something that has been expedited. And there really have been asked a lot about the features that we all like in Zoom meetings. And the indication that I've got is that that's, that those features, whether it's breakouts or otherwise, are things that BigMarker understands are important to online delivery. So Mark, the answer is yes, but I will say, to Hannah's point, other than not having the meeting room, and I don't know, Hannah, if you're going to get into showing the meeting room provides a sort of landing page for folks, which is great. But other than that, you can easily set up a one-person webinar and have all of the recording established. In the interim, Mark. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, there's really not much of a difference other than, that always open piece of the meeting room is definitely something that's really cool. It's what makes it so it's just like the same link each time. But if you are interested in recording like a one-off, like I said, that live webinar format is just as good for meetings as it is for large scale webinars. It's just how you utilize the platform, which we'll definitely get into when we actually cover the live hosting experience as well. So definitely stay tuned for that.
Perfect. Can you guys just give me a thumbs up or give me a happy face? You can see the emoji down there. If you can hear my audio, because I know Henrik's got issues hearing my audio, and I know it's intermittent. Oh, there goes Bimbasar. Yep.
Yeah, Tracy, it sounds loud and clear on my end, so I think it should be okay for now.
Oh, good. Okay, so that might be. Now, the other thing is we've got some hands raised, and that's a bit of a unique feature that I love because with the ability to add people on screen. So I see Kelly's got her hand raised. What we'll do a little bit later is I'm hoping those of you we'll give a bit of a call out. So Kong's got his hand raised. You have to remember to lower it is the other thing, though. If your question's been raised, but we'll allow some people to go online after. So if you've got questions, drop them in the Q&A. The other question here is there a space limitation on the uploaded videos?
So yes. So no, if you're preloading videos, it's pretty much unlimited. You can, if it's a really, really large file, I suggest using the Dropbox integration for just a smoother, loading process. It does sometimes take a while if it's a really, really large video file. If you're loading video files during the live webinar, there is a file limit. I want to say it's 100 megs. So that's just, I always recommend, regardless of if you're hosting automated webinars or live webinars and you're planning to just manually share videos, always recommend preloading that content so that you're not scrambling, during the live session to upload that content, especially if it's those larger video or even slideshow files.
Right. The other thing that I just wanted to give as a webinar running tip is if you ever have a large webinar, my advice is always have a video loaded. And the reason I say that is if you ever have a system issue where your Wi-Fi is getting glitchy, you can always start a video and then figure stuff out. So always have that, especially as you start running whatever the video is. If you've got a 5-minute video, you can just say, hey, I'm going to drop a video on this in, and then you can scramble for 5 minutes to get your house in order, your dog's barking or otherwise. The other thing I wanted to clarify is on the recording of webinars, which is different than the uploading videos. There is, I think that there's no real limit on the number of recordings. I think they put 1 terabyte somewhere just to protect for fair use. But that's something like 2,000 webinars. And with Zoom, I keep getting I'm over my my storage. So that's a nice feature.
Right.
How do people lower their hand?
So right now, it would be done from the host perspective. So you can call on people and it's definitely a feature that we will be adding, is the ability to lower it. But for right now, from my host control panel, I can actually click on that hand raised next to their name to then clear it from my end, so that I know that I've called on them.
Perfect. Thank you.
No problem. So in the interest of time, should I go in and click on the create live webinar, and we can kind of go through that as well? Or do we still have questions about?
You go ahead. You go ahead. Yeah, that's great.
Cool. So, and I'm a little zoomed in here. Let me zoom out. So once you select the webinar type that you want to offer, you'll notice that you are coming to this scheduling page to fill out some really, really brief information about your webinar, title, date and time, really standard stuff. You can even add like an about section and agenda topics here. But of course, all of the things that you set here can be editable later on, with the exception of the durations, or excuse me, not duration, if it's a one-time or recurring. So let's say you do want to offer a live webinar, but you want to offer it maybe, a few different times. Maybe you're doing like a live demo, but you want to offer it maybe every day this week or something like that. At the time of scheduling, you'll have the option of selecting one time or recurring. Now, when I say that you won't be able to adjust this later, you can still certainly add additional recurring times later. But if you're setting it up, you'll need to set it up initially as a recurring webinar if you want to utilize that feature. If you don't need to, all you have to do is select one time, and then it's just that one-off webinar. And then again, like I was mentioning previously in the channel, we also have privacy settings for the live webinar. And this is stuff that will not only protect webinars from showing up on your channel, but you can also use our advanced settings, with the privacy aspect to only allow certain people, whoever you want to allow to join your webinar to join. So we'll get into privacy settings in a little bit, but, really standard kind of brief scheduling process. And then from there, you're clicking create webinar. Now, I've actually already gone ahead and, created this webinar. This is a demo that I have coming up, next Tuesday here. So it is, an active real webinar on the site. Now, as you can see here, I have a register button here up top. And this is actually a really interesting and unique point to BigMarker that I always like to mention outright. So not only is this the page where people come to register for your webinar, but it is also the place where people come to enter the webinar when it's live. And if you choose to record your webinar and you want to publish that recording so that people can view it, on demand, that recording will publish to this page as well. So throughout the entire life cycle of the webinar, this is the landing page for your event, and the link never changes. So you can always share the same link. And people will be able to access this page regardless of the, where it's at in its life cycle. And as you can see here, I have, an about section, agenda topics. I have myself as a featured presenter listed, and then also hosted by, that would be my channel here. Now, if I scroll up to the top, and forgive me, I'm a little zoomed in here, so let's go back and zoom out a little bit. You'll notice that I have this kind of banner, this admin banner here at the top right-hand corner of my screen. And from here, I have a few buttons. So let's kind of cover those really quickly. First and foremost, I have this edit page button. And this is going to allow me to do, really quick, brief live editing on my landing page. This is where I can edit this big banner image here at the top. I can actually change the button color. So we have some stock colors available, but you can also add your hex code if you want to, add a very specific color. So I can change my button to like this magenta color, something like that. Also, I can change the logo here. This is, again, my channel name, but I can always adjust that logo here at the top. And then, also some live editing as well. Like, I can adjust my about section and agenda topics and things like that. Now, obviously, this is pretty brief editing. For more robust editing, you'll notice these two secondary tools here at the top. The first being change template. Now, the concept of template designs on BigMarker is really, really cool because we have so many and they look so different. So when you're setting up your webinar, you can actually decide, what the layout and landing page will look like. And you can scroll through and choose from, all these different really beautiful landing pages. Now, if I preview one, you'll see that, when it comes up on the page, it's going to look so, drastically different from the one we were just looking at. This one has the featured image on the right. It has the register button on the left. It has a big gray banner with the about section, and it has larger presenter profiles for the featured presenters. So a very different design. It's very aesthetically different. And you can go through, and whatever images you've chosen to add in that banner image will then resize accordingly for that specific landing page. Now, the kind of third and final button that I wanted to cover is that Manage Webinar button. And this section of the webinar is going to look really familiar to you as a host, because this is the back end of your webinar. This is what you as the host of the webinar are visiting each time you come to your webinar page. And I like to, when I go through this, I like to kind of call out that I'm kind of giving you more of an organizational approach than going through every single feature, because as you'll kind of find on BigMarker, we have a lot of features. There's a lot of things that you can do. So it's really important to understand the organization of how this is set up, so that if you are, scratching your head thinking, okay, where am I going to find privacy? Okay, that's probably going to be in the edit tab, because this is where all of the, webinar details can be modified. So we'll really cover, what you can kind of expect out of each section. And then if anyone has any questions about specific features that I'm not covering, we can definitely cover those too. So on the edit tab of my webinar, this is where all of those kind of true editing details can be made. So webinar details, I can modify the title of my webinar. I can change the date and time even. I can add an about section, very standard editing. Now, what we were covering in the channel previously is that difference between, channel hosts and these guest presenters. So I really want to reiterate that you can add as many guest presenters to your webinar as you like. To do this, all you have to do is click Add New Presenter and fill out the credential, all of the details listed here in the pop-up. Now, the important part here is the contact field, because when you add a guest presenter, it's going to send that person an invitation to host. And in that invitation, it's going to contain a personalized login link. Now, the personalized login link is not only going to auto-log them into their account when they click it, but it's also going to log them into the webinar with those presenter credentials, that role as a presenter. So they don't have to do anything. You don't need to bump them up when they're in the webinar room. They're entering with that role, so they're good to go. As long as you add them, beforehand, they'll be good to go. And another cool thing is permissions. I really want to quickly cover these because there's so many, interesting kind of things that your guest presenter can and cannot do. You'll notice that the bottom three are auto-enabled and the first one is auto-disabled. Now, the first one is they can manage the webinar page. Now, if you select this, this means that they will have the exact same view of the back end of your webinar as you do. That means that they can modify any of the, webinar details. They could change the images. If you want to give somebody full creative control over your webinar, so I would probably keep it more to an internal role. You can select this, but that's why it's auto-disabled, because, a lot of times people are inviting a guest presenter that they don't really want them to be messing with their webinar. They just want them to be contributing to the live session. Now, the bottom three, I just really want to quickly cover these as well. So the first is can access the admin control panel in the webinar room. This is what gives people admin access to the webinar. We have three levels of kind of control in the webinar. We have attendees, which essentially enter with no controls. They can't share mic or webcam or anything like that by default. You can certainly enable that for attendees, but it's off by default. We have presenters, which gets, they can share mic, webcam, videos, slideshows, and screen sharing, but they wouldn't be able to start and stop the recording. Now, admins have the full, control over the webinar room. And if you do want to allow a guest presenter to have admin access, you certainly can. But if you don't, just uncheck that box and you're good to go. Now, the bottom two are a little bit more of the kind of pre-webinar setup. So displaying the presenter on the live page. If you remember back to the templates, how we saw those featured presenters listed. Maybe you just want to have somebody behind the scenes and you don't want to feature them on the webinar. Just click that and it's going to remove them from the landing page, but they'll still be able to enter the webinar with that kind of, host role. They can just be more behind the scenes. And then finally, remove BigMarker contact options. So let's say you do want them to be listed, but you don't want your attendees to be able to contact that person. All you have to do is remove that, and then they won't be able to gather that featured presenters email or Facebook or whatever they've added as a contact option. And then once you are ready and satisfied with your permissions, you can click save, and they will just be automatically added to your presenter section. Now, one thing I do want to cover is, let's say your presenter has misplaced that email and you want to get them that presenter URL, that specific URL that only they can use to log into the webinar. If you want to, you can find their name, their presenter profile here in the presenter section. You can just copy that presenter URL and share it with them. So it's a really great way if you're scrambling and they can't find that email, or whatever has gone wrong and you just want to send it to them. That's a really quick way to do it. Now, let's see. Okay, one question that I am seeing right now is how many speakers can join the webinar? So again, any presenters, you can add as many as you like. They will count towards the overall head count in your webinar. So obviously, if you have the 100 attendee plan and you're inviting 99 presenters, then only one attendee, would be able to attend then. But we do not limit the number of guest presenters you can add. Now, the number of people who can share a device at one time, so I'm talking mic or webcam, is 9. So if you have 20 presenters that you've invited, just making sure that, when people aren't talking and you want to free up some mics, just say, okay, disable that so that, or, stop sharing that so somebody else can take a turn.
And just to jump in there, as on the admin side, I can easily do that from my end as well. So
right.
let's say that Hannah was done talking and Kelly Murray wanted, was the 9th. It's a simple click to add, and you can enable all and disable all of them as well. The other thing that's interesting is this presenter profile just looks really nice once you've set it up on all of the different webinar platforms.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and it's really great, especially if you have like a high profile speaker that you really want to show off. A lot of those templates really are built for that. So, if you really want to highlight those presenter roles, a lot of those template designs will definitely accommodate that.
Okay. Let me know when you want more questions, but let's finish this.
Yeah. Let's cover I just want to cover 3 more things in the edit tab, and then we can definitely take more questions before we move on. So the final 3 are selling tickets. I know this is a kind of hot topic item on BigMarker, the concept of being able to monetize your webinars. Now, if you go to the sell tickets option here, you'll see that it's auto-selected to no tickets. All you have to do to set up your ticket prices are either select paid or even donation if you want to offer it free, but do like a suggested donation price. So let's go to paid. All you have to do is set your price to attend live, and then also setting the price to view the recording. Now, this does not mean that you have to necessarily publish your recording, or this does not also mean that people who purchase a live ticket would have to then again purchase a recording ticket. This is only set so that if you publish your recording and you want to still bring in those ticket prices for people who may have not been able to make the live session or didn't purchase a ticket ahead of time, this is capturing that person. And you can make these prices different. You can keep them the same, and you can just set that there. And then obviously, if you want to offer, a coupon code to people to attend this event for free, a 5-digit code will be auto-generated for your webinars. So you can share that with people if you want to give like friends and family for free.
Can I just ask you a quick question about viewing recordings? Mark's asked this question. When setting up the ability to view recordings after you're done, the one feature that isn't available is people that were invited but didn't register or attend. It's just, for a number of us, we would want to make that available even if they didn't register or attend. Is that something that we can talk about maybe even after the fact, and maybe Mark can show you where that is?
So one thing I want to note is, what I recommend, so on BigMarker's end, the way that we control who can and cannot view is who has like an account on our back end, so to speak. So if they're invited but did not register, for example, we'd want to be able to recognize that person, especially if they're like coming back to the site, since they wouldn't have necessarily like an account with us. So it makes it a little difficult to ensure that that person is who they are when they're revisiting the site. I can definitely talk to our developer team and see if there's any way around it, but that's currently the reasoning behind why we don't currently offer that, because we just want to make sure that if you do have privacy settings in place, that people who, are only the people who are supposed to be watching that recording can be watching it.
Okay, that's great. And Mark, one of the things just on the Facebook group, one of the things that we do with the lifetime deals that we launch in our group is during the deal, we try to keep discussion here, but certainly I do know that and Hannah, this is just for your information, we've had real success with those that have launched a lifetime deal with us, having a special Facebook group for their lifetime deal customers.
Definitely.
And the reason why that's important for those of you who are newer to our group is that BigMarker has a large community of recurring customers. So I'll be honest, many of the companies that we offer with don't want a bunch of people going into their regular Facebook group talking about the fact that they got this wicked lifetime deal.
Right.
But what we've found, Hannah, and I've talked to Ju about it, is the ability to have this group of lifetime users. And again, it's really useful when it comes to beta launching different things.
Definitely.
So Mark, definitely, I think that's a great idea. And you want support questions to go to support, but during the deal, there's this blending of that. And Mark, I think that's a really good point.
Right, definitely. So we've actually discussed, with my team and just the BigMarker team in general with this lifetime deal, is that, we are so interested in hearing your feedback. We've gotten such good feedback and questions and commentary from this group, and it's so valuable to us. So we are definitely going to be creating not only just like a roadmap specifically that we can share with your group, but also a place for submitting feedback and requests and things like that, and being able to actually upvote those features and requests and things like that, because we do value your feedback and opinions so much. It's something that we definitely will be exploring in the very near future, just with all of the craziness of the deal and everything like that. It might be a few days or weeks out, but you'll be seeing it very soon. So really quickly circling back, because that question about privacy was so good, is I do want to cover the privacy settings for your webinars to make it abundantly clear that we have kind of two different kind of separate privacy sections for each recording. You have the live webinar that you can make public or private. Now, the difference here being public webinars are searchable on BigMarker and also on search engines, and then private are not listed publicly on BigMarker, or they're not searchable on search engines. So the default setting is that anyone you share the link with your webinar will be able to attend. But of course, like I mentioned previously, you do have these advanced privacy settings that you are able to utilize. So, if you only want to allow members of your channel to attend, for example, you can. Only those who you've sent an invitation from BigMarker, or, only those you've given a password to or something like that. You can definitely, modify these settings according to your needs. And then also we have the privacy for recordings. Now, this is separate. And this is what, the person who asked the question previously was talking about. So with your recording, you can decide, anyone who has the link to your recording will be able to view it. So again, this is if you publish your recording. If you don't choose to publish your recording, these permission settings won't matter, because it won't be, viewable on from a customer's facing perspective. But you can also certainly limit it to channel admins or presenters. You can do channel subscribers only. So again, this is a great option for people who are setting, fees to be a member of their channel, and they only want to allow channel subscribers to view it. But also you can limit it to those who attended or registered for the webinar as well. So those are the options that you have for recordings. And again, if you do want to allow people to, view the recording, and you still want to collect their, those contacts as leads, you can require registration to view your recording as well. And
Hannah,
that's
could I just ask a question about that?
Yeah.
The other way to deal with this, and Bimbisara's asked this in the Q&A, is there is the ability to embed webinar recordings and webinars themselves.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and we'll get to that in the Manage Webinar tab.
Okay,
but we have, a registration widget, so people could register from your site. We have a live webinar widget, so people can view the live webinar from your site, and then also a recording widget as well.
Thank you.
So the final thing that I wanted to cover, because Tracy had a really excellent question about, breaking down that conversation section into an individual webinar. So you'll notice at the very bottom of and let me just find it really quickly because it's hiding. Aha, discussion board. So you'll notice here in the advanced settings of your edit tab that if you do want to allow people to comment, on your webinar landing page before the event, or even post like a poll or a handout or something like that ahead of time, you can enable this discussion board section, and it will show the conversations section on that webinar landing page. So, again, for those of you who were with us during the channel portion of today's demo, you saw that, we have a discussion board, but it's for the channel at large. If you want it to just be for an individual webinar, this is how you would enable it, but it is auto disabled by default. So you'll want to go to the advanced settings of your webinar to enable that discussion board. Now, I mentioned that we would take more questions before we moved on to the design section. Tracy, do you see any pressing questions that we should answer before we move on? Let me see. One question that I have that has two upvotes that I just want to quickly cover is the 24/7 webinar a live webinar? Yes, it's just the same as like the meeting room environment. It's just an always open live webinar room.
Just jumping in,
yeah.
Joe, can the chat window be hidden from attendees? Yeah, you can see that, I'm just going to turn some things off. So I'm turning off the show attendee list. So that's on or off. So you shouldn't be able to see the attendees now.
Yes. Yeah, so turning off the attendee list will hide the attendee list in the private section of the webinar. That means that your attendees will not be able to see who else is attending the webinar or how many people are attending the webinar. Now, in terms of turning off the chat and the Q&A and everything like that, we'll definitely get to that when we jump into the live webinar experience, but you can definitely disable both of those, so the chat and the Q&A. But another cool thing is that you can also hide the Q&A from your attendees. So if only you and whatever guest presenters you want to be able to see the Q&As, but maybe you don't want the ability for people to upvote or see the questions being submitted, you can definitely turn that off as well, but still continue to accept questions in the Q&A portion. So we'll get to that when we jump in the live hosting experience, but yes, that is absolutely possible.
Perfect.
So the next thing that I want to draw everyone's attention to really quickly is the design tab, because this is a really, really brief, but also a really cool section in the setup process. So this is kind of a continuation of what we saw earlier. You can change your template from the design section as well. But the thing that I do really like to call out here, just because I think it's a really cool feature, is you can actually change your own logo so that when you're hosting live webinars, it's not going to be branded with BigMarker branding in your live webinar. It's actually going to be branded with your own logo in the top left-hand corner. That you can also adjust the theme color as well. So as you can see in our session today, there's like a light gray. You can certainly choose one of our stock colors, or again, you can add your hex code if you want to add a specific company color to the top banner of your live webinar. And of course, you can save that as default. So each webinar that you host will have the same logo and settings here. And then finally, because I have been getting this question, is what is a webinar preview card? So if you remember back to the channel, how all of your webinars display in grid view, this is just that image that will show up in grid view on your channel. So you can make it look really nice. We have a few stock images available, or you can upload your own. Like I said, I promised it was a really brief section. That's the design section. Now, the following sections are going to be in more of that like marketing and management territory. We've covered editing and design and all that kind of setup. But now we're getting into, how do you email? How do you, do those widgets and all of that kind of fun stuff that you can associate with your webinar. So really, really quickly, what I'd like to mention about emails and invitations is just like any other email tool that you've probably used in the past, like MailChimp, Mandrill, all those kind of fun stuff, is that you can set up and send really nice looking invitations and also reminders for your email, for your webinar, straight from your webinar page. So all you have to do is click new invitation. And from here, all you're doing is uploading your email list. Then you can modify the content in the design of the email. And then you're choosing if you want to send it or schedule it to be sent at a later time. It's a 4-step process, really, really simple. I'm not going to go through it all today just because I think it's really, really straightforward.
Can I jump in on two things on that though, Hannah?
Yeah, go for it.
So first of all, on the email invitations, I'm wondering if you can quickly show people how they can reset the footer so that the email, because one of the things that's, that our members really like is the ability to have, branding for their own sort of brands. And while you're doing that, Henrik, the design settings, you can set defaults per channel, but you can also set different brand settings, different logos and colors per webinar if you want as well. So, let's say that I didn't want 2 channels. I've got 2 channels, one for Civic Excellence, my consulting practice, and one for LTDF. But if I wanted to do, run a webinar for LTDF under my Civic Excellence, I could change the branding and choose not to have that populate my channel and run it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I want to note here is that we do have tokens for a little bit more robust kind of, if you want to pull in the webinar title or the link or the date and time, very standard to other webinar tools out there. You can definitely add those tokens, modify details like, the contact information, sender name, all of that kind of fun stuff. And then in the email design, that's where you can modify the content of that email. So again, choosing the template design, background color, button link, and then also, of course, the logo as well. So you can edit the logo and also the presenter image as well. Now for the footer, that is not in the invitation section. And forgive me, because I haven't actually sent invitations to my webinar in a very long time. People sign up for them with me. Let's see here. And it might not be something that I have on this particular account. Sorry, it is a newer feature. So
what are you showing there, Hannah?
I'm just looking really quickly.
What's the footer there?
I'm sorry?
Right down. Are we looking at the footer? Is that what we're looking at?
Well, right now, so the footer here, so
just scroll up. It's right on footer there, right beside email content, webinar details.
Oh, there you are. Okay. Yep. Yeah. There you are.
And then once you change it, you can make it the default.
Right. So this, so this is going to be, yes, sorry. Long morning here. Okay. So you can do a sent by, a mailing address, footer logo, and footer link as well. And then of course, like you mentioned, save the design as default. Do we have any other questions about emails before we move on? I do want to cover, I want to cover one thing really quickly because I think it's really, really important. Because there are some automated emails that are generated when people register for your webinar that I just want to make you aware of and also let you know what they contain because it is really important. So we have 1 confirmation email and 2 reminder emails leading up to the webinar. So when somebody registers for your webinar, they automatically receive a confirmation right after they register, letting them know that they've successfully registered. And then they also receive 2 reminder emails, so a 24-hour reminder and also a 30-minute reminder as well. Now, as you can see here, you can edit these emails. You can adjust the dates and times. You can even delete some if you want. I personally don't recommend deleting all of them because very similarly to that presenter URL, attendees will also receive a personalized login link that makes it just a 1-click entry point into the webinar. It makes it super, super easy for them to get in the door. And that's how 99.9% of attendees are entering, that webinar. So if you do want to turn all of them off, if you're sending your own emails, that's fine. Just let us know and we'll show you how to essentially extract that list of URLs.
And just to mention that with Zapier and with the Open API, there is the ability to use your own email provider. Mm-hmm. And for the contacts, you can delete contacts, Eric, if you no longer want them to be used. Mm-hmm. And just a reminder that if you've added additional attendees, you get an extra 1,000 contacts. Right. But if you want to use your own email service provider, you can certainly do that. Mm-hmm. With this as well.
Absolutely. And then, all of the other reminders and even general emails that you want to send from BigMarker can be managed from this section as well. I do see that we have tons of questions coming in, so forgive me if I'm skipping over yours. Tracy, I'm going to kind of let you drive the Q&A for sure. Do we have any other questions about emails before we move on to the Manage tab?
With email platform integrations that you have, does that automatically keep the BigMarker contact list up to date?
Right. So the contact list on BigMarker will not be made up to date by like if you're importing like the MailChimp and stuff like that. It's separate. So if you're using the integration itself, I think it should. But if you are uploading like a contact list to BigMarker, it's not going to manually it's not going to change it from the integration itself.
Okay. So there's not a two-way sync.
So it would be for the integration, but not from the contact lists that you have stored on BigMarker.
Okay, thank you.
So let's move on to the Manage tab. And what I want to really iterate here is that this is your home base when you come to your webinar landing page. So it's going to look really familiar to you, as a host. This dashboard here is where you can find all of the really quick links up at the top. So one thing I really want to note is your shareable webinar link. So let's say you want to share your, webinar URL on Facebook or on, blog post or just an email, and you just want to get that quick link. All you have to do is click share link. And from here, you can copy and share that wherever you like. So this is just the general generic link to your webinar. It's not like one of those personal links. You're not going to want to share the one from your email because, again, that is that personal login link. So this is the cleanest form of that link. You can just copy and share wherever you like. Now, you may notice below that we have this thing called trackable links. Now, this is just going to be adding this thing called the UTM_BMCR_source equals, and then anything after that you put will then track where people are registering from. So this one gives the example of Facebook. I always like to say, okay, like Google ad 1, if you're doing ads or blog posts or, whatever you want to kind of generate this as, whatever you think you'll remember as a trackable link. You can copy and generate as many of these trackable links as you want and share them wherever you want. And then when people register for your webinar, you'll actually see, okay, 46 people registered with the blog post one, the Google ad one got 3, so maybe we won't use that in future, all that kind of stuff. So you can actually really see where these conversions are coming from. So that's a really cool feature as well. I definitely encourage you to use it. But if you're just sharing your link, you just want to spread the word, again, that general link is just as good. Now, also you'll see the ability to copy and practice your webinar. So let's say you've built this really great webinar and you want to host it again, but you didn't maybe set it up as a recurring session, or you just want to use what you've already set up as a template. You can copy your webinar and it's just going to exactly duplicate this webinar, except you can change, date and time, and then you can modify any of the settings later on. But it's just going to make a carbon copy of your BigMarker event that you've already set up. And then practice, that's just going to generate a webinar room, a live environment that you can go in and test. If you've preloaded any content or if it's an automated webinar, everything will be ready and waiting for you. And just as if it was a live session, it's going to be played out just the same. So lots of stuff up here at the top. Now, again, this is a really kind of big, vast section. So I want to just draw your attention to these two chunks here, preloading and widgets. So preloading, the concept of pre-uploading the content that you plan to share during your webinar. Now, this is only something that you would use for a live webinar. What we'll get to in just a moment here is the actual automation flow. So if you are planning to set up an automated webinar, that's different. But again, if you're planning to share, any slides or video content or pop-up offers, handouts, etc., in your live webinar, you just want to be prepared, which I definitely recommend doing. You can preload all of that content here. And one question that we had earlier was about pop-up offers, the concept of being able to share a pop-up that people can interact with. Typically, it's like a deal, but I've seen other people use it to pop up like a survey and things like that. So one thing that I really wanted to quickly get into before we move on is that the person was asking, how do we make it a little bit less like large, or, you want to kind of really modify the design. So we have a horizontal and vertical layout. As you can see here, they're very editable. Everything you would want to add here, you can, but you also have the option to custom embed or do an HTML build yourself. So if you do want to make the design your own, you certainly can do that as well. So that's something I really quickly wanted to cover there, just because I know it was a question that we previously had. But for all other preloading, again, any of the content you plan to share during your live webinar can be done in the preload section. Now, the widgets section is another thing that we had questions about. And one thing I want to note is that the recording widget is not here because this webinar still hasn't happened yet. Once the recording has happened, you'll be able to copy your recording embed code as well. But as you can see here, the 3 that we have available right now are registration, multi-webinar registration, and live webinar. So the first 2 are going to allow you to, have people register from your site using a little widget here. And this is the single session. It's already kind of set up for me, but I can always change the image, edit it to my liking, and, copy that code and embed it into my site. The same is true for the multi-webinar, too far, the multi-webinar widget. So you can definitely do that as well. And then for the live webinar or the recording, you're not going to get a preview. You're just going to get an iframe code that you can copy and embed into your website. So, you can certainly stream your live webinar from your website. You can certainly share your on-demand webinar, recording on your website. It's totally up to you. Now, if we don't have any questions, I would like to go to the automation tab to really cover the difference between, the kind of preloading and also the automation workflow. But
that would be great, because
okay.
the whole automation is a huge competitive advantage compared to other platforms.
Right. So one thing I do really want to reiterate is the fact that your automated webinars are still technically live. Again, I used this example earlier, and I'm going to say it one more time. When I host my automated webinars, and this is actually an example of my automated webinar, as you can see, I have this workflow already set up, is I do kind of half and half. I do simu-live in the beginning, and then I jump into the webinar, and I actually facilitate a live Q&A, after the video has played. So for me, it makes sense for me to go, okay, I have two chat messages that are auto going to trigger 10 minutes before the webinar start time, another one 3 minutes before the start time. Then I have a video that's going to play my pre-recorded demo that I've already loaded. And then after that, I go in and I facilitate that live Q&A. Of course, this is not something you have to do. It's very optional. You don't have to be in your automated webinar in order for it to play. But how I've actually set this up is really, really simple. So you'll notice that automation has to be turned on, of course, in order for it to be an automated webinar. And once it's on, you'll see that you have this new auto event button here up top. Now, when I click that, it's going to give me a pop-up asking, okay, what piece of content do you want to, add as an automated event? I can play a video, so again, a YouTube or MP4 video. I can send a chat message. I can trigger a poll to pop up, or a handout, or an offer to pop up, at a specific time. So for example, let's send a chat. I'm going to click send a chat. A drawer is going to slide out asking me, okay, when specifically do you want to trigger this piece of content? I can do maybe let's do 10 minutes after the start time. I give it a title. So for, and this is just for me. So maybe I want to do okay, this is the welcome message or something, so that when I see it in my timeline, I know, okay, the welcome message is going to trigger in 3 minutes and 32 seconds. Then I could just populate whatever content I want to share with my audience. So again, it could be a welcome message. It can be whatever chat you want to send. And when I save that, it's going to automatically go into this timeline of events. Now, all I have to do is continuously add more auto events, and they're just going to continuously fill up this timeline accordingly. And one thing I also want to note is at the bottom here, you'll notice that there's this concept of exit URL, and when do you want to end your webinar? So let's say you have a very specific workflow. You don't want to do, any Q&A at the end. So maybe let's say right at the end of the video, we want to kick everyone out and end the webinar. So all I have to do is decide the exact moment that I want to end the webinar. Now, again, I have that buffer time because I like to be in there and facilitate that live Q&A, but you can make a very specific end time. And you can add an exit URL so that the people will be directed to a landing page of your liking after the webinar. A lot of times people will do this if they want people to fill out a survey post-webinar or something like that. But if you don't add an exit URL, it's just going to send people to the landing page of your webinar. So it's totally up to you. It's totally optional, but it is a cool feature that I always like to note.
Do you mind just mentioning, can automations be launched on the fly, Joe's asking?
So one thing to note is that you cannot set up an automation if the webinar is live. So if you are planning, so let's say you want to set up an automated webinar and you want it to be, happening as quick as possible. My workaround for that would be to schedule it in advance so that the webinar room isn't open. One thing to note is that for hosts, the webinar room automatically opens 1 hour before the scheduled start time. So maybe you want to schedule it to be, 2 hours from now. You can set up the automation as you need to, and then you can go back into the edit tab of your webinar and change the webinar time so that it can be happening right now. Okay. Obviously not an ideal situation, but if you wanted to do that, that's how you would do it.
Well, and one of the real uses for this is, I don't know, one of the things I liked about Webinar Jam was the ability to pre-play sort of a video when people are waiting in your waiting room, and they've got one that they have, which is turn off other devices, close your browser. If anything happens, refresh. It's kind of neat because you can set that up and then just use that over again. The other thing that's really neat with automations is even with offers, you can set up offers and have them always available on your channel, which is super cool. So some of this stuff.
So one thing that I would note is that if you want a video to play, you can still do that if it is a live webinar, you can preload that video and then it can autoplay in your live webinar. Attendees can enter 15 minutes before the scheduled start time. So if you want content to be playing, you can either manually trigger it or you can autoplay it so that people have something to watch when they are entering the door.
So this is just sort of pre-scheduled, pre-set up webinar automation. And the good thing about this is that some companies have this, but the ability to do this with live is really quite exciting.
Definitely. And then the final thing that I do want to cover, so let's say that you're not planning to be in your webinar room, or if you are and you still want to set this up ahead of time, you certainly can. With the audience permissions for an automated webinar, you can decide if the attendee list is on, if the public chat is on or off, and even if the Q&A is on or off as well. Now, by default, just to let you know, if you do have Q&A enabled, the view Q&A, so that's the ability for attendees to see the questions being submitted, will be auto disabled. So even if you want to, collect those questions, but then answer them, via email later or something like that, you certainly can. But you can modify all of these settings ahead of time. For me, since I'm in the webinar and moderating it, I don't mind if the chat and the Q&A are on, but I like to keep the attendee list on just in case I have a lower turnout or something like that, and I don't want to see,
you keep it off. Sorry, you said on.
I keep it off. The attendee list, but for the public chat, I mean, this is my, so you're actually seeing all of my personal settings. This is what I prefer because I do moderate the session, but it is totally up to you.
And just to that point, Henrik, you have the ability to toggle the capacity on or off when you set up your webinar on the capacity. Any
other questions before we move on?
Not related to this. Okay. I'm just looking at this. How do you? Oh, so no. We'll get into a bit of a meeting discussion. So I'll field that one, Eileen. There. Go ahead.
Sure. So the final tab is really straightforward. It's just where all of your integrations are. So you can set up and modify these integrations here. Right now, BigMarker integrates with a lot of CRM marketing tools. Our next automation that's coming up soon is ActiveCampaign. I know we've had probably one of our most frequently asked questions that I've fielded from just talking to the LTD people is this ActiveCampaign integration. So it is coming very soon. And, we do also have that Zapier, whatever you call it, integration here as well. So if you're not seeing your favorite tool integrated with BigMarker, you certainly can utilize the Zapier integration as well.
Perfect.
So we've really covered pretty in depth, I would like to say, the setup process for a webinar. Really, the last thing that I want to cover before we really delve into all of your questions at length is the actual hosting experience. Now, I have this called example webinar. You may notice that it looks different from the landing page we saw earlier. That's because this is an example of a meeting room. This is a meeting room that I have personally. It looks, it's obviously just this large image. You have a big button here. You can manage it accordingly in the bottom left corner. If I wanted to, for example, change my shareable URL or change the settings or even delete it, all of that kind of fun stuff. But this is that meeting room. I'm going to show it off as a webinar today, but just letting you know ahead of time that this is a meeting room. So I'm going to enter this. Again, I want to reiterate that your webinar room will automatically open 1 hour before the scheduled start time for hosts. And again, for attendees, 15 minutes before the scheduled start time. So there's no waiting room. It's all technically like a live, once you're in it, you're good to go. You don't have to enable anything. And what I'm going to show you right now is the difference between an attendee's perspective and also a host perspective, because it's a very different experience. First and foremost, as a host, I'm getting this two kind of pronged option here. I have the ability to dial in and share my telephone audio. So if I just want to use a phone to call in and share my mic, or if I want to go the more kind of computer route and share either an internal mic or webcam, or if I have external devices that are plugged in, I can join at this time as well by that phone or computer. So I can make those selections now, or I can also X out. And what you'll notice is that this is the blank state of the webinar room as I see it as a host. So again, different than what my attendees will see. And how I want to illustrate that is I'm actually going to take some of this preloaded content that I've already loaded here. I'm going to open it. And I'm going to open that file and I'm going to zoom in, because the only two aspects of the webinar experience that your attendees will see is whatever content you're seeing here on the presentation screen. So again, it could be slides, it could be video content, it could be screen sharing, it could be if I'm sharing my webcam, or any combination of that, if I'm sharing my webcam and slides or something like that. All of that will show up here in the presentation screen. And then to the right, my attendees also have access to this chat panel. Now, what my attendees will not see, but what I have access to as a host, is this sharing toolbar here at the top right-hand corner of the screen. Now, this is going to allow me to do things like share my microphone, my webcam, and then also screen sharing, and then all of that content that I was able to preload ahead of time, it's going to be ready and waiting for me in one of these buttons. So, if I'm sharing slides or videos, or even that offer pop-up, if I'm not creating this automated webinar, I can manually retrieve that content from these three buttons here up top.
Can you show where the raise hand pops up? We just had Aisha ask that question.
Sure. So I don't have any attendees in this room, but if I had attendees in here, you would see their name listed just as my name is listed here in the admin section. And just as there's this little blue star next to my name, that's where the hand would show up. And if I were to scroll over it, it would show like a little X. So I can, if I've called on that person, I can click on it and it's going to take the hand away from their name.
I'll just see if I can paste a screen copy of that in there. Thank you.
So the final kind of aspect of the hosting experience is this host control panel. It's kind of the holy grail of the webinar experience. It kind of allows you to manage all of the permissions, the recording, everything like that in your webinar. So it's really important to understand. So this audience tab here is going to allow you to manage the things that we've kind of already covered, but I just kind of want to give you a visual representation of what it looks like. So attendee list, again, if I disable this, if I turn this off, it's not going to allow my attendees to see who else is attending the webinar. Now, the same is true with the public chat. So if I turn this off, I still will be able to, communicate in the public chat as a host, but my attendees will not be able to utilize the public chat. Now, the other two are Q&A. If I want to disable it entirely, you'll notice that it's going to disappear here, so people won't even be able to see it. But I can also keep it on, but I can also disable the view Q&A. And again, the difference here is that do I want my attendees to be able to see the questions being submitted, or do I only want myself and my guest presenters to be able to see it? If the latter is true, turn off the view Q&A. If the former is true, keep it on. So again, these are more of the audience permission roles for the chat. And then below that, you'll actually notice that we are able to enable all attendee mics and then also all attendee mics and webcams. I don't recommend doing this for webinars. It's more of a traditional meeting tool. So again, proceed with caution is kind of what I always like to say. Because if I do enable these, all of my attendees at any point in time will be able to share a microphone or webcam. Now, it's not auto turning on mics or webcams. It's just giving them the ability to share them. So again, great for meetings. I always recommend turning this on for in your meeting room or, in just quick meetings, but not so great in a lecture style format, kind of like today's session where, we will definitely be allowing mics and webcams later on, but, now is probably not the best time.
Okay, just a question here from Mark. When you share your screen, he was saying the only option he had was to share the entire desktop. Versus even though he had multiple windows open. Is that to be expected? Like, what are the screen sharing options?
So I'm actually only sharing a single application window, as you can see here. What I'm assuming is he may have been on Firefox. So right now, Firefox, you can only share your entire screen. If you want to share a single application window like me, where I'm just sharing my one browser window, you're not seeing other, like my toolbar at the bottom or any of my other screens, then you'll want to go to Chrome for that.
Great. We've got some questions about additional channels. Please upvote the one question that's there. And we are in discussions with BigMarker about that. But at present, adding a channel is you add another deal and you can manage it under the same admin panel.
So
and we also will be talking about additional hosts.
Right. So currently, if you do want to purchase another channel on BigMarker, just take that, the special link that was included for the deal, you'll need to sign up currently with a new email address, but what we can do on the back end is actually merge the two accounts. Now, as Tracy just mentioned, we will be coming out with some additional deals and things like that, but we haven't announced it quite yet. So I'll let kind of, Tracy announce that later on, I think today, but, right now, if you wanted to like go in and immediately purchase another channel, that would be how to do it.
Any options as well will be, buying early will never be a disadvantage. So,
right.
so we're talking, we're certainly open to the feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we have some time. You do not have the ability to take over the other person's remote control, Raymond. So you can't remotely manage somebody else's screen using BigMarker.
So you can definitely, so in the attendee section here, again, just as my name is listed here, people will all have individual mics, webcams, and also a little ellipsis icon. So the 3 dots icon next to their name, that if I were to click that, it's going to allow me to bump them up to presenter or admin control. So all of my attendees will be listed below here, and I would be able to either individually allow them to share mics or webcams, or even bump them up to presenter and admin control. So they would be able to share their own screen, but then I wouldn't be able to control their screen from my.
I think what he's asking about is, can I remotely manage their screen and do things? And no, you can't, Raymond. Nope. That's not that's not a BigMarker feature. Mm-hmm. Can we remove the telephone audio option? Yes, Eric, that's something that you can choose to add or not when you set up your webinar.
Right. So presenters always have the ability to dial in. It's definitely not something that's required, but you can definitely, from the edit tab of your webinar page, you can manage if attendees can dial in. An attendee dial-in is a listen-only experience, so it's a bit different from just sharing like the presenter dial-in information, which will automatically allow you to share a mic or a webcam. Or excuse me, a mic. You can't share a webcam on a phone.
Okay. Does the attendee limit count towards recorded webinars?
No.
Rob, it does not count on the recording feature. If you're using the automated features, then you're actually opening a room. So the only, when Hannah went across the 6 webinars, the second one across the top is a pure recording. So that one has no limitation or attendee relationship. The others, though, where you're actually opening a room with the capacity to interact, do depend on your attendees. Is that correct, Hannah?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Does the attendee limit count towards recorded webinars?
Right, so unlimited people can view your recordings. As long as they're either the on-demand or just the published recording, you can have as many people, actually view that recording. There's no limit.
And Aisha, you can absolutely toggle mics and cameras on and off once they've been added, you can, and the other thing you can do is you can also remove somebody from the room with the ellipses on the, if Hannah had presenters there. Actually, do you mind if I try sharing my screen here?
Of course not. Go for it. No, it's gonna kick me off, but
oh no, forget it then. Forget it. That's
no, it's totally fine. Here, what I'll do is I will go to our session. Oh, I see that we have a deal going on. Wonderful. And as you can see here, I have the.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, thank you.
So I have, and as you can see, so if I were to go to Aisha's name, you can see that I can unblock this individual mic or webcam without giving, everyone access. I can do it individually as well.
But then she has to accept that. Like that doesn't automatically.
No, it doesn't accept. So it's just going to give her the mic and the webcam options here at the top of the screen.
Okay.
And then she can click them up there or not. Another thing that I wanted to illustrate is, if I click on this little 3 dots icon, I have 3 options. I can kick the person out, I can make them a presenter, or I can make them an admin. And going back to this demo now, the presenter role, so the guest presenter, they will not have the host control panel, but they will get the sharing toolbar. If you do have full admin access, then you have the full host controls. Now, what we didn't cover that I really quickly want to cover is these 2 kind of other panels here. So the recording, which again, this is a meeting room, as I mentioned earlier, so I don't have the start recording button here. But if it's just a regular standard live webinar or automated webinar, I would be able to click start recording. And as Tracy mentioned previously as well, there is a little pop-up that you'll see in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, so that if you don't remember to look over here, you'll definitely get that pop-up to remind you to click record, that you can click right from the landing page, or excuse me, from the live webinar room.
I'd just like to give a shout out that I would love to have recording on by default, but that's just me.
So unfortunately, we don't have automated recording right now. So
and that's the flip side of having unlimited storage is
right.
I'd rather have the unlimited storage, the 1 terabyte.
And then the automation tab as well. So if you are attending your automated webinar, you don't have to do anything from here. But if you just want to follow along with your timeline, you're actually going to see, so this chat message is going to send in 2 minutes and 32 seconds. This video is going to play in 13 minutes and 4 seconds. You're going to see a countdown for each individual action, so that if you did want to interject with like a Q&A session or anything like that, you totally would be able to do so.
Perfect. Can you just show how it toggles from your screen share onto your video, just so people can see, what that looks like?
You want me to share my webcam with my screen sharing?
Yeah, just to sort of toggle between those two.
So we actually wouldn't have to toggle. I can share both at the same time. So if I share my webcam here.
And I've added myself as well. You can see it walked Hannah through a bit of a step there. You saw on her screen share where it was making her check her coverage. If you see any lag on my video, just a reminder that I am on hotel Wi-Fi. Over to you, Hannah.
No, we've covered a lot of ground today. I just want to kind of step back and take a moment to really cover what we've covered. So what we've done is we've looked at the channel, we've covered how to set up a webinar, and then we've of course covered how to host a webinar as well. As I mentioned, I do really want to get into all of the great questions that we have coming in. So Tracy, unless we have any other questions, I can go off screen sharing and we can just kind of dive into the...
Yeah, if you could just toggle into your full screen camera. I think that's what Joe wanted to
okay, sure.
And I'm wondering, is there anybody on the call who wants to jump in and ask their question? Just raise your hand if you want to come on here. Bimasar is asking, can we organize webinars on folders in our channel homepage once we build up a large catalog, some organization system? And I think that's where the tagging you were talking about, Hannah?
That's the tagging. It's not available quite yet, but that's on our roadmap. I would say we can expect that in a few weeks. We have designs for it. It's just something that we need to work through design flow and then build it, of course. But it's already on its way. I've seen designs. It looks awesome. So
perfect.
Stay tuned.
Aisha is asking, how early can an attendee or a virtual assistant enter a room so I can make them a presenter and be ready for live? Like how early can a presenter enter?
1 hour before the scheduled start time.
Perfect. And Aisha raises an important point. And again, I want to highlight this. Hannah's talked about this. There's 4 different types of interactions with a webinar. There's the host, which is we have one host with the account and they can independently run a webinar. We then have admins, which inside a webinar have the privileges to manage that. And Hannah went through, you can decide how to give different privileges then to presenters, and then you have attendees.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Vitali's asked, is a person speaking highlighted like in Zoom with a green border? It didn't look that way. It looks like when both you and I were on camera.
Right. So I don't have here, 1 second. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen anymore. But just above the chat, you'll be able to see who is speaking. It says now speaking. And from there, you'll be able to see who is speaking. So if you have people only sharing microphone, or if you just have a lot of people sharing webcams and you're also sharing content, you'll also be able to see at the top of the chat who is speaking.
Perfect. I'm just looking at the chat here. Okay. Joe, she's been going back and forth. At least it's not lagging on my system, and I'm on the world's worst internet. But I'm just looking at this. Does anybody want to jump on? Just Aisha, did you want to jump on screen? Bimbisara, any of you at an area where you are interested in presenting? Kelly, Kimberly, anyone? I'm going to try making some of you presenters. You don't have to be on screen if you don't want to. But
so yeah, another option.
Sade, yours here, Dev. Go ahead. Yep.
Another option too is if you just click on the unblock mic and webcam next to their name, they'll be able to share a micro webcam too.
Oh, I see. I don't have to make it.
Yeah. Right. You don't have to make a presenter, no. But if you do have any questions, click on the hand icon just below the chat. And here, I'll show you. So I've just done it. We have a lot. So whoa, there's so many. I have not seen any of these yet. So as you can see in the bottom of the chat, I've raised my hand. So if you do want to come on and share a micro webcam, you certainly can. Otherwise, it looks like we do have a lot of Q&As that we haven't gotten to.
So Joe wants to, we've had full screen share throughout the presentation, Joe. I'm not sure what you mean. You said you haven't seen full screen share, just screen share with video included. The overwhelming majority of the entire presentation has been full screen share. So we can perhaps do a demo offline. I'm not sure what you're asking for there. Under the Q&A, can you choose the video stream quality beforehand?
Yes. So when you go on, and again, I'm just sharing my, as you can see, my Apple earbuds that are very tangled, I noticed, and also my MacBook Air webcam. So I'm obviously not using really state-of-the-art equipment, but if you have, great cams and stuff like that, and you want to get the most out of them, you can actually choose the frame rate and the resolution ahead of time when you're entering, when you select those, devices in the pop-up. When you first enter the webinar, you'll be able to also choose your frame rate and resolution.
Perfect. And Michael, we're not negotiating the deal on the webinar. So we have had requests for additional hosts, and that's certainly something we'll look at. Can you have different, for example, in this situation where I'm on a terrible hotel Wi-Fi, does the system do its best? Like how does it handle, the fact that I'm assuming you're on a high speed and I'm not?
Right. So I'm actually back in this little corner. Our office is rather loud today, so I'm in the quietest little corner that I can get into. So I actually haven't checked my internet speed, but I am directly plugged in. And one thing to note, and I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I just kind of went off on a tangent there.
Just about how it deals with varying speeds.
Okay, so varying speeds. So first of all, let's talk about, what kind of is bandwidth intensive. So webinars as is are bandwidth intensive, internet environments, let's say. So what's going to be a little bit more bandwidth intensive, and when I say a little bit, I mean a lot of it, is sharing your webcam and screen sharing. If you find that you're on a not so great internet connection, you still want to host a webinar, if you're sharing mic only, and if you have slides or pre-uploaded like video content that you want to share, you should be good to go. You can also fall back on if you wanted to share that telephone audio, if you're on super slow speed and you just don't want to risk it, that's going to give you an ironclad connection that isn't really going to affect the webinar regardless of your speed. Now, another thing is, we've had questions about resolution and frame rate. In addition to being able to heighten it, you can also lower it. So if you do really want to share a webcam, but your speed is not wonderful, you can certainly lower the frame rate and the resolution to be able to accommodate in those lower speed environments.
Perfect. Okay. I'm just looking here. Yeah, Joe, we've demoed the different options here. So I'm just, let's keep us focused on this here. Can you host a webinar from a mobile phone?
Yeah, so we have two different options for mobile devices. If you have tablets or mobile phones, right now you can either use the BigMarker app or the just the mobile browser. So it's totally up to you. The mobile app actually, it has a more like hosting friendly environment. However, you're not able to really do much other than share mic and webcam. So if you are looking for a more robust experience, but let's say you are caught, in a place where you don't have your laptop or your computer or whatever, and you need to host, you certainly can. I probably would recommend hosting from the mobile browser in that case, if you have slides and things like that you'd want to share.
Aisha said webinar from a phone. You living on the edge, Daredevil.
I don't disagree, but it is good if you have guest presenters that are just sharing audio and video or something like that. But if you're doing like a full-fledged webinar, I don't necessarily recommend hosting it from a mobile device, but in a pinch, it will work.
And in that case, I strongly recommend you use the upload slides, upload videos, just to have everything ready to go. Right. So where you might use that is if you've got a largely automated webinar and you want to do a simple, like for example, for this, with me being in a hotel in Vegas, whether I'm on mobile or otherwise, to minimize the, because if the slides are uploaded, that's a huge feature. The other thing that's interesting is if you upload slides, you can use the whiteboard feature to actually mark up. It's super cool.
Right. It is. So what we didn't really cover today, but if you do want to use like a highlighter or like a pointer kind of thing, we do have a drawing tool that you can utilize that when you upload your slides on your live webinar, you will be able to, draw on them and highlight, and you can pick, the marker size and the color and everything like that.
Eric's asked, what mobile operating system is the app for?
We have Android and iOS for both apps, and also for the mobile browser as well.
Okay, perfect. Vitaly asked about, right now the only upload is for, nothing for Ludus, Vitaly, at present. You would use screen share for that. For slides, is it PDFs that you upload, or what's the format of the slide upload?
That's an excellent question. So we recommend, if you can, export to PDF before uploading your slideshow. That's going to provide the best result. If you can't, no worries. I mean, you can still upload a PowerPoint presentation, no problem. But what tends to happen, because everything will be uploaded as a PDF, is that in that conversion process, if it's a really text-heavy slide, or if you have like I said, mostly just when it's text heavy, it's going to maybe affect the formatting. So to just preserve all of the formatting that you have, we recommend definitely exporting to PDF beforehand if you can. And that's just a best practice. But
I'm going to rattle through these last few questions and then let everybody start their day, partially because I'm overlooking the hotel pool here. So
Tracy, I must say, I'm
self-interest here.
Yes, I don't disagree. Vegas sounds like a lot of fun.
Well, the good thing about Vegas is it's 24/7, so there's no hurry to get anywhere. But
yeah.
So Henrik asked, are you able to change the recording? So if you make a local recording in better quality, can you replace that and upload it afterwards?
That is an excellent question. So if you want to modify your recording in any way, or if you just want to upload a different one, like you said, if you've recorded, and you want to upload your own version, you absolutely can do so. So what happens is after your recording, post webinar, it's going to be available on the Manage Webinar tab of your webinar page. Now, under that, you're going to see a series of a few buttons. One of those is Replace Recording. Now, if you want to replace the recording, you can just upload the new video file there, and it will just replace it. And then if you want to publish it on BigMarker, then it will just share the replaced recording. Also, from that section, you can also download the recording. So let's say you want to trim out the first 15 minutes where you press the start recording button too early and it's just kind of dead space, and you want to get rid of that. You certainly can. You just want to download the recording file, trim it up a bit, and then you can re-upload it as like the new and improved version.
Perfect. So another question is, can I save the chat with the recording for a webinar replay?
Yes, so it's off by default, but if you want to include the chat in the recording, all you have to do is go to the Edit tab of your webinar page, to the Advanced Settings section, and there's one of those options where it's going to say, do you want to include the chat transcript in the recording? And it's going to show up in real time, so you'll see, the chat will correspond to the video in real time. And then also, if you download your recording, it will show up as a separate file, so it's not going to be preserved in the download, but you will get a transcript included with that as well.
Do I have the ability to choose which, so say that I said, oops, I'm running to the, get a drink of water. Like, can you actually decide, to keep the main questions in, but maybe not, or?
So let's say you have a chat feed, and again, so it's only going to be the chat that's going to show up. So if you are planning to include the chat transcript, you want to maybe turn off Q&A. Now, what's going to be preserved is anything that you want. So before you end the webinar, just making sure that if you don't want any of the questions or the comments to be included, just to go through and delete those. So if you scroll over, you can see there's a delete button underneath it that you can delete, and then whatever you delete will not be included.
Okay, so I've got one other area. so one of the things that I don't prefer in the current meetings is like in the meetings feature, so not the webinar, is when I reopen my meeting room, the chat is still visible. And for me, when I use it, and so this is something that I'm just looking, I think Eileen asked this. I would prefer to have previous chats deleted by default or archived by default. Because if I'm using it, I don't want to like have said something cheeky about a client and then use my meeting room for my client. So I'm hoping
that'll be removed. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Good question, Eileen. I'm just going to try to knock some of these off. So automated webinar, Kong, I think we've dealt with. Integrations, Vitali, are there any plans to have our own booking calendar or other integrations? Right now they've got Zapier and API and certainly have been open to other integrations that we've raised. Is that the...
Right. So also we have Calendly, which is something that I personally use for my own like one-on-one demos. It's a really great tool. Obviously, you have to have a Calendly account in order to use it, but I think it's actually really, really cheap subscription price. But with that, people will, once you set up the integration, people will be able to set up specific times with you, and then it's going to auto-generate a BigMarker webinar once they've scheduled that session with you. So if you're scheduling a session based on my calendar availability at 11 o'clock tomorrow, then it will auto-generate that event, and then we're good to go.
Yeah, and that is something that we'll see. You know, we'll talk to BigMarker about some of the big ones that we've got and see if perhaps there's a way to do that with others. Bimasar, the chat is not ever building at present in recordings. This is a feature that Zhu and I have talked about. And what we mean with that, Hannah, is we've got the chat for a single recording. When you rerun that automated webinar with the chat, can we keep building on the questions? So right now that is not a feature of Bimasar, but it's something that Zhu and I have been talking about.
Yeah, so currently you can only like pre-populate your automated webinar with chats from the host side. But like you mentioned with Jusong, he and our developer team and also our designer team have been looking into ways to make the automated webinars a little bit more robust so that it seems like there's a larger audience in there. So that's definitely something that we've talked about in the past.
Yeah, and Bimasar is saying, I'm surprised I haven't heard of BigMarker. BigMarker's always been, you know, I'm a bit of a webinar nerd, Hannah, you know, and I don't know if you've seen my spreadsheet where I try to compare all of the different webinar platforms.
Love a webinar nerd.
But what you'll find, it's been on my radar for quite some time but again, it's been in a lot, because I come from government, it's very popular in the university. It's very popular in those sorts of areas, maybe not quite as much in the IM space. And that's largely one of the attractiveness about this process for them, is to try to position this robust system as also something that regular people and entrepreneurs, you know, it's got all of that functionality as well.
Right. So Tracy, you hit it right on the head. So actually, to give a little bit of a background about BigMarker, so we're about 8 years old now, a little bit over. And initially, BigMarker started as a platform really to cater to nonprofit organizations, education, or you know, education-based organizations. So that's why Tracy, as mentioned, said that we are really popular in that space. In the past 3 years, we've really pivoted a little bit to offer really robust marketing solutions, because we did see a need for that in the webinar space. I mean, you have all these webinar tools out there, but you're also using, you know, email tools and landing page providers and, you know, ticketing sales, and, you know, you're going to all these places to essentially do one thing. So that's why we built on the whole marketing side, and that's why we're kind of just now, you know, very recently kind of becoming one of the more major players in that side of the webinar hosting space. So that's why, you know, we seem like a newer name, but really it's just kind of we've pivoted a little bit, and so we have a broader range of use cases. And as I was saying with the channel, you know, we have the channel essentially because our roots are in that nonprofit and education-based space. So it's great for people who, you know, have these groups and want to use it. But it's also, you know, for people who are doing one-off webinars and everything like that, we offer all of that lead generation and all of those opportunities that are, you know, more with marketing-based solutions as well. So that's, you know, the answer that I would definitely explain. But, you know, we like Tracy said, she's heard.
So just I'm going to answer these last questions and then we're going to pull the plug. My daughter's patiently waiting to go head down here.
She is very patient.
Aisha, I love the idea of a sort of pre-play video that could run, you know, while people are in a waiting room. So that's certainly an idea that I'm going to take offline. Can a webinar be free to channel subscribers and have a paid option for others?
So what you could do is we have that coupon code that you can generate for your paid webinars. So one thing that you could do is either hand out that coupon code to your channel members. So you could put it in the discussion section and say, hey, sign up for this webinar. You can bypass payment by entering this 5-digit code. Another option would be that you can import that list of people. So let's say you have your channel subscribers, you can import them as registrants so that you're doing the registration step for them. And then anyone else who wants to register for your webinar would be able to do so and then purchase that ticket.
Perfect. Can a one-time registration be used? I don't know what that, not annual. I don't know what that is. Do you lower your hand just by clicking on the raise hand again? Is that how you do that?
So right now, there actually isn't really a lower hand option from the attendee's perspective. It would just be on the host side that we would be able to call on. But I'll definitely go to my design team. It definitely seems like something that would be easy to implement. So
it would be great to have people lower their hand because a lot of times people just test features and then they are perpetually live there. Okay, so having seen this, great idea for coupons. Can you have a lifetime payment versus annual?
What they might be thinking. Oh, I was supposed to say
that might be for the channel.
Right. So with channel dues, again, they can be monthly payments, they can be biannual, and they can also be annual. So if you want to like stop payments after a certain point so that, you know, they pay once and then you're turning off the fees after that so that it's, you know, a lifetime payment, then you could do that. But, you know, it's something that we don't currently have, so it'd be a workaround. Any other questions that we have today?
So I want to say thank you so much, Hannah.
Absolutely.
For this, I want to say Bimbasar really likes the community focus. I just want to say thank you so much for your time. I know that we've gone longer, and I appreciate all of you for staying. You couldn't hear me, Irene, because I had myself muted. So you can refresh. You know, one of the things I'd really like to request, Hannah, is just the ability to add a pinned message at the top, because 99% of the problems that I have with attendees on webinars can be solved by a simple refresh. And I'd love the ability to pin a message to the top of a webinar, just reminding folks of that.
Absolutely. I'll definitely submit that feedback, Tracy. I appreciate it.
Okay, awesome, everybody. You have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'm going to log off here. Everybody take care.
Thanks so much. And again, everyone, this was recorded, so I'm going to stop the recording now, but you will.
Yes, you're in charge, Hannah. I'm going to let you do that.
I'll deal with it. No problem.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Goodbye.
And enjoy that pool. And